In today's podcast, I will be speaking with a registered psychologist, Dr. Ganz. He is a speaker, an author, and a coach. And since the early 90s, Dr. Ganz has been helping individuals, couples, families, and corporations to beat burnout, reduce their levels of stress, improve their relationships, and just enjoy more success. Enjoy! Okay, so you work with helping people beat burnout and stress. What exactly got you into that in the first place?
It's a great question. So part of it was me burning myself out and dealing with a whole bunch of stress myself. Earlier in my career, really wanting to make my name and help people, I really spread myself way too thin, and so I was going and going and going, and then one day I actually woke up. I did this little loop in northern Canada where I live, and I woke up one day and I didn't know where I was, and I'd had a headache for two weeks before that, and I said, "Oh no, I hope this just doesn't sound good. This sounds like it might be a stroke or something, right?" Fortunately, it wasn't a stroke. I figured out where I was after about 15, 20 minutes. I figured out where I was, and I said, "Okay, something has to change," and that really sort of was the catalyst to help me recognize that, okay, you can have a lot of good intentions, you can even have good training, but if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be good for anybody else. And it's kind of obvious, because anybody who's flown on a plane has had the experience of the flight attendants doing the safety talk and said, listen, if you're traveling with somebody who needs assistance and the masks come down, you have to put your own mask on first. We hear this over and over, but a lot of times we don't really recognize how it applies to ourselves. And so that was my wake up moment to really realize, okay, I have to have a different system so that I can look after myself and keep myself, like happy, healthy, functional, not just for myself, but also for the people that I serve and care about.
Wow, that must have been scary. What were you doing at the time?
Well, I was a psychologist, but what I did was I did this loop of about maybe 6 little towns around
Yeah.
the place. And I worked in schools, working with kids, doing consulting with some of the teachers, as well as working for social services in Alberta here for a while, working with some of the kids in those settings. And so I've always been drawn to psychology. It's like 30 years or more now that I've been doing it, and always had just a curiosity for how our brains worked, how we worked, and but interestingly enough, and I think this is a little bit different than the majority of people in the field, I really wanted to know what makes us happy and healthy and functional, where a lot of people have the idea that psychology is all about finding something wrong and fixing it, right? It's
Yeah.
more of like a medical or a deficiency model. And I've always really been I've really been skewed towards figuring out what makes people happy, healthy, productive, you know what I mean, high performing, and let's figure out what that is, and let's learn those tricks, learn those techniques, and see what we can do to put those into practice in our own lives, so we can all feel good.
Yeah, so then you just kind of started to focus more on stress in psychology and happiness and where that all comes
Yeah,
from.
yeah, exactly. Well, we know that stress is one of those things. Well, it's a huge issue. Well, it was a huge issue before the pandemic. Then you overlay the pandemic on top of that, and now all the chaos with the war and everything else that's going on. A lot of people are really stressed, and we don't always understand like where it comes from and also the effects of
Yeah.
stress. But the research is really clear that stress is one of the things that, if you have a weak link anywhere, it's going to attack that. So if it's a weak link in your relationships or how you communicate, it's going to attack that, and make those things worse. If there's a tendency towards addictions or any kind of dysfunctional habits, is going to attack that. If there's a physical weak link, like tendency towards diabetes or cancer or heart disease, well, we know it's going to attack that too, right? So really getting a handle on stress, understanding what it is, where it comes from, and what to do about it, really has huge benefits to people's lives, but also their performance at work and how they function within their social life, their families, with their kids, and other people they're connected with.
So with the people that you work with, Have you noticed like a shift in the causes of stress and burnout over the years?
Um,
Or
Not
is it
really.
kind of relatively similar
It's
sort
yeah,
of
it's
causes?
pretty consistent. It's pretty consistent. You know, I started off doing private practice, working as a registered psychologist, and I do more speaking and coaching now.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much the same. It's been the same over the past few decades. That
And
the common things that get us down, like relationships with people we care about, stress from work, money issues, money by the way. And I don't know, they haven't done this research since the pandemic, but before the pandemic, money was the number one cause of stress for people's lives, for individuals' lives, and also the number one cause of tension in relationships. So, the common things that we all deal with are the things that stress us out. Now, again, the pandemic is sort of an anomaly because there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of people who we usually rely on our social systems to be able to support us and
yeah.
help us through stressful times. But those are the very things that we couldn't access, right? Because that we had to isolate. So that was was an extremely weird but very stressful time for a lot of us, and a lot of us still going through it. I know for me, still trying to figure out how to connect with people again after being isolated
Yeah.
for so long, right? Kind of being
Yeah.
weird when we first meet in person, and how do I make small talk again? You know,
Yeah, it's like we're so out of practice. It's like, how do I interact with someone?
right?
But it's like we're such like social creatures. It's like
Yes,
such so against our nature to be like confined away from others.
yes, yes. It is, and in just a study of humanity, just from an evolutionary sense, being in a group is what has given us our advantage. We've been able to support each other. We've been able to divide labor. We've been able to learn from each other. And so it really, you're right. It goes so against everything that's sort of ingrained in us to not be with other people, and thankfully we have platforms like this where we can see and talk to each other, but it's still not quite the same.
Yeah.
It's good. It's thankful we have it, but it's not quite the same as being able to see somebody, see their whole body, not in a little box, right?
Yeah.
And then also be able to hug and shake hands and whatever, just touch another
Yeah.
human being, right?
And so do you find that most stress caused from the pandemic is from the lack of communication that people are getting with others?
Well, so it's layered, right? Because
Yeah.
there is there is the sort of separation that takes away the support systems that we would normally have, right? When you're stressed or having a hard time, we reach out typically, and well, when we're healthy, we reach out and we connect with other people, get some support, that sort of thing. So it we've lost something that would really help in that way. But I think that the main two main pieces to the pandemic that's been very stressful. One is like just sort of the existential threat, right? I mean, especially at the front end of this, there was real fear that like a lot of us were
Yeah.
going to die, and the world was just going to be like wrecked. You know what I mean? Or not survive at all. So there's that real fear that was hitting us early on, and I know particularly with young people. I've got two kids; they're adults now, but I remember at the beginning, this was a conversation in our house. It's like, no, it's going to be okay. This is a big thing, yes, but there have been other big things in the world, and we've gotten through them. But a lot of people, especially younger folks that didn't have I guess, the context or the experience of life as much, really there was a lot that fear that I think is still in a lot of people. And then the other factor is that as humans, we we value predictability and routine to some extent. We like novelty and different things, right? Variety. But when there's uncertainty, that is a very stressful situation for humans to deal with. And
Yeah.
the pandemic was full of uncertainty. It was a brand new virus. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how it was spread. We didn't know the effects. We didn't know long-term effects. I mean, we still don't know some of those things. But the uncertainty about the flow of life, because before the pandemic, there's a certain expectation of how life would work. you kind of figure that if you did this, then this would happen, right? And we some sort of were lulled into the sense of this is how life is and it will always be like this, and that was, violently and quickly taken from us. And so that uncertainty was extremely stressful for the majority of people. And then I guess a third factor is usually when there's big stuff that happens in people's lives, there's somewhere else you can look to see that it's okay over there. Do you know what I mean? Like if there's a fire or a war or whatever, you know that there's some other part in the world where there's not a fire, there's not a war. And so, okay, well, that gives you hope and it's something to hold on to. Because the whole world went through this at the same time, there was not that type of interaction. And that is something people don't think about a lot, but it was extremely an extremely important part of the stress we all felt.
Yeah, everything just became so unpredictable,
Oh yeah.
which really does cause stress when you don't know what's going to happen. Do you think that the pandemic meant that a lot of people would have to work at home, and I feel like a lot of people ended up continuing to work at home afterwards, but also a lot of people like have been quitting their jobs because they just realized that they weren't happy with their jobs. Do you think in some way it kind of almost relieved a bit of stress from some areas of people's lives?
Well, that's a great point, because I believe everything we go through has the potential to carry positivity with it. The old saying of, the cloud with a silver lining, or, making lemonade out of lemons, or whatever you want to call it. I think some of the positives that have come out of the pandemic are those shifts. I mean, there have been a lot of innovations in terms of technology. There's the idea of working from home and having that flexibility is one of those things that I think a lot of people kind of felt that they wanted to do, or felt might be a good idea, but didn't know that it would be accepted, and the workplace didn't really know that it was a thing that could happen. And so because of the necessity of that, we figured out, hey, we can do this and we don't have to necessarily commute as much or travel as much or do whatever. I mean, the whole video chatting platform, this stuff just took off, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of good things that came out that way. But I do agree. I think the whole world, because of the course of the pandemic, this might sound silly, but I say the whole world had a midlife crisis around the same time. Right? And what that was we had the opportunity to slow down, take stock, figure out, do I really like what I'm doing right now? Do I like how I'm living? Are these decisions correct for me? Right? And when people who do a midlife crisis correctly, that's what they do. They look at themselves, they take stock, and they figure out, okay, here's what I want to do going forward. And a lot of us have been able to do that, and I think it's a wonderful thing. It's going to be, a bit of a reset for the world, especially the world of work. But it does mean that when people kind of settle in what they want to do, there's going to be a lot more motivation, a lot more innovation, because they're happier. They're not just doing it because they've always done it. They've actually made some conscious and deliberate choices about how they want to live.
Yeah, it kind of forced you to slow down and just look at what you're doing and realize what's important. And it's like, am I happy? Like, if I end up dying of this thing tomorrow, am I happy with what I'm doing with my life?
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's really important for people to realize that, because I think often we go on a path and we don't think about where we're going, and then before we know it, we're somewhere that we're not really happy with.
Yeah. Well, so I wrote this book. It's called The Me Factor, and it's sort of my system for keeping myself healthy and happy and functional, right? And other people have wanted to share it, so I put it in a book, and it's available, right? But in the book, there's a quote from Stephen Covey. He's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People guy, right? And the quote says, it's really hard. I'm paraphrasing. It's a tough thing when you spend your whole life climbing the ladder of success. You finally get to the top, and then you realize it's been leaning against the wrong wall the whole time, right? And that's to me, that's a chilling quote, because you spend all this time and it's not going to make you happy. And so one of the main things that I learn, and it's a question that I ask my people that I'm, when I'm doing like executive coaching, or if I'm speaking or whatever, it's in the book. It's the question is this working for me? Because I don't think that we should have to wait till something big like a pandemic happens, or a major illness, or a divorce, or a bankruptcy, or some big event. I don't think we need to wait to become excuse me, to become conscious and deliberate about our lives. We can ask that question, is this working for me, anytime we want,
Mm-hmm.
about the pair of shoes we're wearing, about the relationship we're in, about what our career looks like. Yeah, I think it's an important question, because if it isn't working for you, then maybe look at ways to tweak it, look at ways to negotiate it, or maybe leave and find something that does work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, Lisa, like so many of us, we I don't know. We just work we work the factory programming that we're given, and we never really think about it. We just do it because everybody else is doing it, or because we've always done it, or this is what mom did, or this is what dad did, and we it's really not our lives. We're
Yeah.
living something else, or someone else's life, or some sort of conglomerate of all these influences we've had, but it may not be ours. It may not be the ones that we've chosen. We
Yeah.
may not want to do this particular thing, but it's what's expected of us because of our
Mm-hmm.
culture, or because where we grew up, or whatever, right? And I think as humans, we deserve better.
Yeah, for sure. Because since the pandemic kind of made us reflect on all of this more, like, what do you think is a good work-life balance? What do you think
Mm,
people should be considering when they're asking themselves these questions?
that's a great question. So I've my system consists of 11 factors, right? There's external factors, which are like, yourself. There's a partner, if you have that, kids, if you have that, extended family and friends, and then work and the rest of the world. Excuse me. Then internal factors, we're looking at, physical, your physical well-being, emotional, social, financial, intellectual, sense of purpose, and I forgot the last one now, but there are internal factors that we need to have in order for us to function well. And so when you're looking at having a harmonious life, you really need to think about not just, a lot of people figure out work, because that's, especially in Western culture, that's kind of where we're focused. A little bit better in Europe, I gotta say, better in Europe than it is in North America. In North America, there's just an over focus on work, right? There's more of a sense of having more of a full life from the folks in Europe, but the idea is, okay, let's figure out the job, and then we organize everything else around that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that that's the right way to do it. I think the job can be important, especially, well, it provides food and money and that sort of thing that we need to
Yeah.
survive. But it can also provide an outlet for self-expression.
Yeah.
It can provide an opportunity to experience mastery and contribution. It can provide a way to connect with other people and feel part of a team and have meaning. So when we look at it that way, then we're coming at it from a place of what is best for me. When I look at all these other factors that are important to me, how do I make sure all these things are organized and fed on a regular basis, so that you know work gets my best? So here's an example. So with the external factors, right? If you can imagine, coming back from a nice, relaxing holiday, right? Nice vacation, maybe somewhere warm. You're in an exclusive, all inclusive. People bring you little umbrella drinks and food, and you know what I mean. You don't have to really think about
Yeah.
anything, right? And and before you go away, somebody came in, or while you're away, even somebody came in, cleaned your house, stocked the fridge, have you all set up. They send a limo for you at the airport. You take a flight in the middle of the afternoon, so you're not having to fly all night, so you're well rested when you get there. The limo picks you up, takes you home, and you got this beautiful setup. You got food that's there for you. How would you feel?
Happy, relaxed. I like
Happy.
it.
Right, exactly. So now, if you're in a relationship with a partner and they've done the same thing, Do you think you guys would be better or worse as partners? Would you be better or worse?
Better.
Better, right?
Yeah.
So let's say you had kids. Do you think you'd be better or worse parents?
Better, I guess.
Right. So now the kids are doing this. Maybe the kids had their own vacation if you want, or maybe they came with you, so they're feeling good. So your family's taken care of. So when you feel like that, do you think you'd be better or worse when you're relating to extended family and friends?
Better.
Better. So now your health is taken care of. You're feeling relaxed. Your important relationships are taken care of. Your family and friends, your external connections are good. Better or worse when you go to work the next day?
Better.
Better. Work is going to get more out of you.
Yeah.
You're going to be more motivated. You're going to be happier to be there. You're going to be a better team member because you've taken care of the internal stuff first. Now, the nice thing about it is because you're better at work and it flows better, work is also going to start to fill you up again. Because if you're feeling good in all your other parts of your life, and then you show up at work and work's just cruising along and you feel awesome, well, you're feeling it's just more energy feeding back into the system. And so that's where that work-life balance, or what I like to call work-life harmony, comes in, because we're starting with the right thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to building everything around work, you're building everything around your well-being. And because of that, work gets much more, and it's more fulfilling when you go there.
Yeah. So it's all about kind of cultivating and creating that right mindset so that you can go and do your best at whatever you do.
Yes, absolutely. The best mind, the right mindset, and knowing that managing your state of well-being, your state of happiness, your physical state of, health, all these things are important, and not just an afterthought. Not just, well, I'll do it if I have time, or if there's leftovers at the end of the day. It's kind of like I'm not going to put fuel in my car unless I've reached my destination, right? It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
No, you put fuel in the car so that you can reach your destination.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to work, we don't really think about it that way, but that's really the way to do it. You have to fuel your life with healthy things, all the factors that are there that are important for you to make you happy, so that you can have fuel to be able to do your best and show up the way you want to.
Yeah. So there's lots of really stressful jobs where you're just constantly kind of going to be stressed or put in stressful situations. Like, how are you supposed to deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I think of, people in healthcare, especially right now,
Yeah.
right in the hospitals, the first responders, but other stressful jobs. Every job can be stressful. So I think there's a few things that I teach people to do when I'm coaching with them. One is to make sure you understand what the meaning is for you in the job, right? A lot of times we end up in a job because it's sort of the path of least resistance, or it's a family tradition, or whatever it is, right? And it doesn't mean that that's necessarily a bad thing, but there's something very powerful about a sense of choice and a sense of permission. And a lot of times we haven't been taught that we can give ourselves that sense of choice. There's a landmark research project, an experiment that's pretty famous in the psychology world. It's called the button. And what they did with this experiment was they had a bunch of people in a room, and they were bringing in, they're piping in a bunch of noise, like construction noise, babies crying, traffic, just stuff that was really distracting and annoying. And they had these folks filling out tests and doing puzzles and different things like that for about half an hour. And what they did was they took those people out, they got an average of their performance in that time, and then they just kind of kept that. Then they brought another group in, same setup, same noise, same volume, everything, same tests. But this group in the second scenario had a button that they could hit, that they could shut off all the noise. And then they looked at the performance, the average performance of that second group. And that second group's performance was way higher, way, way higher than the first group, right? And this has been replicated lots of times with different groups, right? so but they said, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense because they had less distraction. The truth is that no one in the second group ever touched the button, so the conditions were exactly the same. The only difference was the folks in the second group understood that they had choice,
Mm-hmm.
and because they had choice, their stress levels went down and their performance went way up. So when you were looking at these high stress occupations, when we can recognize that we choose, we have a choice. We don't have to stay. We don't have to stay at the job. We don't have to stay in the profession. We don't have to stay wherever. But sometimes we choose it
Mm-hmm.
because it makes sense for us. We choose it because it provides a good lifestyle, or it provides a lot of money, or I like to have a sense of contribution, or when you can find that meaning in work, and then recognize that you're choosing it. You're not stuck. You're not a slave. Now that you might have to really look for that, because sometimes you think, well, yeah, but if I don't do this, I don't have a house. Yes, I agree. And there are people who live without houses. Do you know what I mean? And so you're still choosing. You're choosing to do this because you'd like to have a
Yeah.
house. It would make more sense for you to have a house, so you still choose it. But just by that sense of choice, that experience of choice, and giving yourself permission to work in that field, all of a sudden your stress level can go down. It's much more manageable, and then you're able to perform better at work. But that's part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, when you can, you want to give yourself breaks from that stressful environment, so you can get really breaks throughout the day where you can take them, but then also bigger breaks throughout the week, throughout the month. Every now and then, certain professions have what's called a sabbatical, right? So you go on sabbatical or take a bigger break. That's going to help break things up. And then the third factor is counterbalancing. Okay, so if we think about our lives as the balance scales, right? If you put a lot of weight on one side, the other side goes up. If you put weight on the other side goes up, right? If there's a lot of things that are sort of taxing us, quite stressful lives, and it's weighing down on that stress side, well, sometimes you can take things off that stress side, but sometimes you can't. It's just a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do? Well, you can counterbalance it with other things that are positive, that feed you, that put deposits in your happy bank, so to speak. And so what that is where can I find those things? Well, some of those things might be just a little scenario we ran through, going on a nice vacation, having somebody look after you, right? Looking after all your factors in your life, so you have harmony in your life. That puts stuff on the happy side of the equation. It can be connecting with people you care about. It can be having meaningful hobbies. It can be doing things, recognizing how your job contributes to the greater whole, and having that spiritual and purpose connection in what you're doing. But whatever is meaningful to you that helps you feel good and puts more weight on the happy side of the equation, then that balances the scales. And what I teach my folks is, you want to overbalance on the happy side.
Yeah.
Right? You want to have way more on the happy side because it's more fun, and you have more of a buffer when when challenges come up for you.
Yeah, I've never thought of it like like a scale to balance. Like that's a really good kind of metaphor, is it? Or analogy.
Hmm.
Yeah, I definitely do find doing just little things that make you happy just really add up and makes a big difference. Um,
Huge. Oh, I'll give you one more thing that you can do, right? The other thing that we lack in our culture generally is the power of celebration. So those little things that you were just talking about, yes, they make a huge difference, but you can amplify them even further when you celebrate. So when you celebrate what you've done, you celebrate the fact that you get a break, you celebrate the fact that you were only 5 minutes late when you're usually 10 minutes late, right? Any little thing that is movement in the right direction and that you celebrate, and now you don't have to throw yourself a parade, right? It can be like, right on, that was good. Whew, I love that. Yeah, that was good. You know what I mean? Just the acknowledgement of that, it actually helps those things have more weight on the happy side of the balance scale, on the happy side of the equation. I teach my guys, my folks, that it's, celebration, excuse me, celebration is the fuel for future success. Celebration is a fuel for future success. So when you take the time to celebrate the good that you have in your life, you put yourself in a different state of mind and state of body to create the chances of you being more successful and having more stuff to celebrate in the future. So it's this virtuous cycle that we get to create for our lives. And when we're doing that, well, what I find is the best defense, best way to protect ourselves is to be fully offensive, to be, best defense, good offense. So working on ourselves on a consistent basis and building ourselves up, feeling happy, having a good life, we naturally have, that protection from stresses that come up.
Sorry, I think you froze for me. Could you repeat that last bit?
Oh, okay. Okay. From where? Which part?
From just the bit where, just like the last 10 seconds, basically. Or 5 seconds,
Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, what I was saying is, when you celebrate, when you celebrate, you actually put yourself in the right mindset and body set to go and find more things to celebrate. You create more things
Yeah.
to celebrate, and then that just, you create a virtuous cycle where things just get better and better and better. And after that, you have way more weight on the happy side of your equation, happy side of your scales, and that protects you. That protects you from the challenges that come up now
Yeah,
in
I
life.
think Jordan Peterson made an analogy or something once about lobsters, and like they do these fights, and then the lobsters that win are more likely to continue winning. It's like if you kind of put yourself and acknowledge that you're winning, you're more likely to win in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. That self-belief,
Yeah.
very important.
Do you think that some of these high stress jobs, do you think that they teach people to handle stress properly? And do you think if they do teach people to handle stress properly, if there's anything that other people could take into their lives? Any like techniques?
Right. Well, some high stress jobs do it really, really well. A lot of professions don't, unfortunately, right? I think a lot of professions see it as almost like a rite of passage to suffer or to be stressed out. You know what I mean? They think unfortunately, some of them see it as, no, well, if you're not strong enough to hack it, then you shouldn't be in the profession, right? It's getting better. I think people are realizing that they can't just, humans are not just these machines that run and don't have feelings and stuff like that, right? So it is shifting, and a lot of high stress, traditionally kind of those kind of macho types of professions where, you just tough it out, just get through it, right? They are now recognizing that, no, we have to train people to deal with stress in the job, but then we also have to have some aftercare so that when they leave the job, or if they do have an injury or whatever, emotional injury, we have some net to catch them, some supports for them. So it is getting better. But jobs that are traditionally very, very high stress and people understand it, such as air traffic control, right? Now that's always been, since people recognize the stress in that job since the early 70s or 60s even, right? And so, what they do is very, very good. If you're on, like I say, a 10-hour shift, you work for 1 hour and then you're mandated to rest for 1 hour, right? You can't keep at it, because they know that your visual acuity, your ability to focus, your decision making, all that stuff goes down with time if you don't take a break. So they make you take a break. They set it up so that people can take naps. They can read. There's food available for them. They make sure they teach them that they need to stop and they need to refuel before they go back and have another burst of intensity of managing the air traffic. You look at lifeguards, and I'm not sure how it is in your country, but I know here what you'll see is, whoever's in the tower looking at the pool, they get down and they walk around, and you can time it. There's about every 10-15 minutes they get up and walk around, and if they have 2 or 3 other lifeguards, some other lifeguard will go up in the tower, and they keep switching, and that's built into the system because that is a way to manage stress. So some professions they get it and they work with it. It would be nice if all of us got it, and some of the higher stress professions also kind of took that in. But you even look at stuff in tech, which I guess it's sort of a self-imposed higher stress position because they want stuff to move, and there's a lot of movement in that industry. But they do it well too because they have a lot of creature comforts, isolation rooms, available food. They take people on retreats. They do a lot of things to increase the experience of working for a company. But also built into that is stress management, because there's joy and there's fun and there's stuff that goes on the happy side of the equation. And so, like I said, some of these industries do it really well, and others, are getting
Yeah,
better.
probably would you say like the more dangerous industries get it more? And then maybe like some of the bigger companies get it more? The ones with more money?
Yeah, some of the bigger companies, they start to get it. Yeah, the smaller companies, sometimes they,
Yeah.
they're startups. They're trying to make it. They're shoestring budget and that sort of thing, right? But yeah, when you know that life and death is on the line, you do tend to take things a lot more seriously, right? The medical profession is still working on this, right? Because a lot of our folks in the first response, in the medical profession, still have a lot of stress on their shoulders, and it's not as built into the system generally as it is in some other
Yeah.
industries, right? But I think particularly with the pandemic, they're understanding that, okay, this has taken a huge toll. We need to make sure we can survive, not just at the end, but through it,
Yeah.
right? Because we know that generally the better you feel, the better you do. So the better you feel, the better you perform. And if you're feeling good, you're feeling rested, you feel looked after, you're going to perform better, and everybody's going to benefit from that.
Yeah, I think the problem with the health industry is like the lack of staffing, and it's quite hard to relieve
Hmm.
a lot of people's workload when you don't have enough people to replace them with. So it's kind of like its own little
Yeah.
cycle because then people will get stressed and quit, and then there'll
Yeah.
be less staff, and it'll just continue.
Yep. Yeah.
What
Yeah. I agree.
What do you think? This. How do you think you can recognize if you're burnt out? Because I feel like burnout it could happen gradually, and you might not even notice it.
Hmm. No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's insidious. It, little bits at a time, right? You start to not feel as energized. You start to not enjoy the things you used to enjoy. Your motivation starts to go. You start to doubt yourself, right? Um, Start to be much more
Hmm.
irritable, right? Little things that wouldn't have bothered you in the past become big things that feel like they're huge. There can be sense of, like, in later stages, there can be sense of anxiety, depression, or in my case, waking up and not knowing where you
Crazy.
are. Right? That was a very, very late stage, right? Tension in relationships, abuse of substances, or sex or religion or jogging or whatever your thing is. You start to use that in an unhealthy way. Um, so yes, it is insidious and can really catch you. What I use for myself when I teach my people is just kind of a quick and dirty
Hmm.
10-point scale, right? 10 being the happiest you've ever been, and 1 being I need to be hospitalized. And if what I've done is I use this so that I ask myself, where am I right now? What am I feeling right now? And I just take a gauge of myself a few times throughout the day. So with my gauge, if I'm above a 7, I'm okay, right? And that means that I'm doing things well. I'm feeling pretty good. I'd love to be around an 8 or a 9. That would be awesome. If you could live at a
Hmm.
10, that would be great. I don't know if that's realistic though, right? But if you're like anywhere between, above a 7 to 9, you're doing okay. If I hit a 7, what I realize is, okay, I'm not doing so well, right? And so for me, that might be, I didn't. It's been a couple nights since I've had a decent night's sleep, or I don't know, but I'm just like, I'm kind of pissed off, and I'm just snapping at the kids, or short with the wife, or whatever. Um, I realize, okay, I've got to do something to feed myself. All those things we talked about, the me factors, the external, the internal factors, I've got to do some of those things sometime this week. I've got to plan for something to put on the happy side of my equation
Yeah.
sometime this week, right? If I hit a 6, well, I can't wait for the week. I've got to do it today. I've got to do something good for myself today. Because if I hit a 5, then I've got to stop what I'm doing right now and start to make that change. Because once you go below a 5, what happens is the things that would normally feed you start to feel like work. They start to feel like, oh, you mean I got to go eat that cake? Oh no. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just something that you would like to do normally is going to feel like drudgery, and it's not going to feel like you want to do it. And it's going to take a lot of energy, an energy investment on your part to get it to go. And it might take a lot of that activity to start to feed you back to get you up your numbers, right? So you don't want to let yourself get below a 5. Well, and I really say I don't like to let myself get below a 7, right? Because I like to have that buffer so that if I start to feel bad, I know I can put these things into it. And so part of it is knowing yourself, knowing what feeds you, knowing what makes you happy, and then making sure those things are built into your life on a regular basis so you can stay 8, 9, you know what I mean? 8.5, whatever it is, stay up there more of the time. But if things start to slip, okay, I
Yeah.
know what I need to do, right? I used to live in this smaller city in northern Alberta, and it was about 6 hours away from the other major center. And it was, a little bit isolated, one road in, one road out. And that's where we were living. And what I found was, after living there for a while, I would start to see these symptoms. And I recognized it was about 6 weeks I could be there without getting out, and then I'd start to have these problems. So I started to build in a trip out of the city every 6 weeks. It might only be a weekend or
Yeah.
even a day, right? But just getting out every so often and knowing that I had that built into my system so I could look forward to it, that really helped. It really, really helped. And then what I also did was I found things in the city that really fed me. This particular little city was just beautiful. It was very natural setting, and they had great bike paths and walking trails. And so I bought a mountain bike, and I would go out and I'd ride on these trails, and that was one of those things that really fed me and put good inputs on the happy side of my scales and helped me to stay at a 7, 8, 9 most of the time.
So it's a matter of kind of recognizing where you are on the scale and giving yourself permission to get yourself back up higher, back up closer to the 10. Um,
Yep.
have you ever come across anyone
Yes.
that's like addicted to stress or like burnout?
That's a great question. So I would
Yeah.
it would look like that. I wouldn't quite call it addicted to it. It's more like you're stuck, right? So it looks like an addiction, but it's more that you're stuck in a certain behavioral loop, which means I'm stressed, and I don't know how to not be stressed. Typically, when it comes to change, well, and let's just do an experiment here, so all the listeners can try this at home too. If hopefully you're not driving when you're listening, but if you cross your arms, and you can do this. So cross your arms and just notice how
Yeah.
easy that is, right? It just feels really natural, right? Okay, now cross your arms the other way.
Totally weird. Yeah.
Weird, right? Right. It feels weird. Okay. So there's nothing morally wrong with crossing your arms the other
Yeah.
way, whatever the other way is. Okay. It's just different. So when we're in a routine, because the first time I ask you to cross your arms, everybody's in a routine. We've done that millions of times. Just cross your arms, right? You don't think about it. It takes very little effort, very little energy to cross your arms the normal way. When you're asked to do it differently, the other way, a lot of energy is taken, a lot of focus to, okay, which one
Yeah.
arm goes where, you know what I mean? You take a lot of time and you have to think your way through. Well, this is how our brain works. When we are used to doing something a certain way, in this case, stressing out, okay? When we're used to stressing out, even if it's not functional, it's familiar and it's easy. It just flows. There's an actual pathway in our brains and our nervous system for this type of response, this type of activity, this type of feeling. When we want to do something different, especially with something as ingrained and as sort of unconscious and personal as our emotional responses or acting a certain way, it takes a lot of energy to overcome that. It takes a lot of energy to do the healthier, functional thing that's going to make us
Yeah.
happier. We may not always have the energy to do that, right? Because energetically in the moment, it's cheaper just to keep going, right? Than it is to make that change. So a lot of times when you see people who look like they're addicted to stress, this is what it is. And then you have to layer in the whole fact that all of our behaviors at some point were functional in some way. Okay? Even the stuff that looks really dysfunctional, looks very damaging, at some point in some way it made sense. And so a lot of times the stress or the dysfunctional behavior we see with other people or ourselves was put there to help us survive
Yeah.
something at some point. And so if somebody, was in a like a legitimately threatening situation and worrying or looking over their shoulder or being like hyper aware was probably functional because it helped them get through. But the more intense that situation, the earlier that situation occurs, it's easier for that behavior then to get stuck, right? Because then not doing that
Yeah.
might seem unsafe, or that's the message we send ourselves because it was unsafe at one point. And so you have the practiced response that's keeping it going, but then you also have this, I guess, this reasoning that you've attributed to it, which again made sense at some point, that says, no, I got to keep doing this because if I don't do this, then it's going to be safe, or I'm going to be a bad person, or I'm morally wrong, or mom's going to be mad at me, or whatever. God's going to punish me, whatever it is that's there. That also helps to keep these things running, and so we get stuck, and we get stuck doing things that don't serve us, but the alternative seems like too big of a hill to climb, especially if you don't have, say, a coach or somebody to help encourage you, give you the bigger perspective, hold that truth for you to help you get to that next level. It can be quite
Yeah,
difficult
for
to do by
sure.
yourself.
Because you just kind of get caught up in these little habits. Um,
Right, right. The
yeah.
programming just runs.
Are there any
Yeah.
kind of little daily habits do you think we should try and start to try and prevent stress and burnout?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I teach folks is journaling. I learned this like 30 years ago because, not only have I been in the psychology field for 30 years, I've been a patient, a client on the other side of this for 30 years. I got my own psychologist, or a few of them that I've worked with over the years. And one of the things that I was taught really early on is to write out my feelings, write out my, in a journal, write out what's going on with me. I fought it for 2 years. I said, no, that's stupid. I don't want to do that. Oh, why do I need to do that, right? But when I started, I said, oh, this is why she told me to do it. Okay. Um, and it really is a way to get the stuff that's stored inside that we kind of have to use energy to contain or to carry around.
Yeah.
It's a way to get it out. And that frees up a whole ton of energy. But then when we see it, when it's out of us, it's objectified. And we can look at it and say, oh, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What I'm doing? Why don't I do it this way, right? And so you have some objectivity, so you can then actually start to problem solve. Whereas if it's just in your head, or you're just thinking about it, or it's kind of haunting you at night, or coming out in weird behaviors,
No.
that's not very healthy, right? What I do tell people though is, if you're going to keep a journal, make sure you're journaling when you're alone. You're not going to be interrupted, and your journal is not going to be read by anybody. So if you need to destroy it after you're done, or hide it away, or lock it away, do that, because you need to have the freedom to just get your feelings out unedited. Your handwriting doesn't need to be good, punctuation doesn't need to be good. You can draw pictures, you can write songs, just get it out. That's very, very powerful and helpful to folks, right? So that's one thing that they can do to help manage stress. Another thing is, talk to somebody like me, right? That's like doing this by ourselves, not a smart play, right? The greatest heart surgeon in the world would be kind of an idiot if they tried to do surgery on themselves, because they don't have the objectivity, right? They're in their own body. They can't they can't see what's going on. You need somebody outside of yourself to help you. Like I said, I have my own coach and coaches, and psychologists over the years to help me to get to where I am. So that's another thing. uh, Two simple things that people can do on a daily basis though is like
Yeah.
sleep. Get enough sleep. Go to bed at the regular time and try to get 8.5 hours of sleep every night. Right? That is huge. That's foundational. When your body is well rested, everything works better. Your hormones work better. Your brain functions better. Everything. It's just you create a virtuous cycle. And then another thing I teach people is something called 60 seconds of celebration. We talked before about how celebration is a fuel for future success. So what I ask people to do is that first minute when you wake up, before you get, or like after you hit the alarm or whatever, just take a little bit of time while you still feel comfortable in your bed. It's like, what do I want to celebrate? And it can be, this is what I'm looking forward to in the day. This is what I feel good about I've done in my life. I can, if I'm really stuck, I can celebrate the fact I don't have to generate my own electricity today, right? That somebody does it for me. I can just something that puts you in the state of joy, the state of celebration. That way you're starting your day in celebration. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. And then you do the same thing at night. The last 60 seconds, the last minute before you drift off to sleep, you do the same thing. Most of us are thinking about the lists of what we didn't get done or what we have to do tomorrow or whatever, right? Then we have disturbed sleep. But if you take the time to, think about the things that make you happy, put yourself in that state of celebration, well, now you're bookending your day. You're starting with celebration, you're ending with celebration. You're starting your night in celebration, you're ending in celebration. Your general life tends to be more positive. And those are just a few things that I teach people when it comes to managing stress and helping them to
Yeah, no,
perform
I
and
like
feel better.
that. So it's kind of like practicing gratitude almost. And
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
always tried to
Yeah.
journal. I literally have a journal beside my bed, and sometimes I write in it, but sometimes I don't. Like, I find it really hard to have the discipline to write in it every day. I need to work on that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is one of those things. It is one of those things that, it does take a little bit of time to build it into a habit, but once you build it into a habit, it just flows, right? And listen, that the habit can be, I write in my journal every day.
Yeah,
Writing can be like 10
yeah,
seconds. It doesn't have to be an hour. Do you know what I mean? And you write in it for 5 minutes or
yeah.
2 minutes or whatever. You still written in it. You still, yep, that's a win, right? And I like to gamify anything I trying to build into a habit. I like to gamify. So I got a calendar, and every time I do what I say I'm going to do, I put a little check mark there, right? And I see how big of a
Yeah.
chain I can make, right? How big of a chain of check marks can I make in my calendar? And when the chain breaks because whatever I forgot or I'm sick or I got distracted, then I see how big of a chain I can make the next time, right? I don't beat myself up and think it's not going to work. No, just get back on, see how much of a
Yeah.
chain I can make the next time, right? And that way you get to build the
Yeah.
habit
No,
a
I
lot
like that
faster.
as
And it's a lot
well.
more fun too.
Do you think that stress and anxiety can be used for good? Do you think it can benefit us in any way?
Um, right, right. Uh, well, tricky question, but so anxiety.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a harder one. Stress, yes, for sure, because there's what's called good stress and bad stress, right? And this is what they call eustress is good stress. And so when you have something that's a challenge
Yeah.
that helps you to perform better, or I want to do 10 push-ups, or I'm going to climb this mountain, or I'm going to get this degree. Well, there's stress involved in that, right? But it's stress that it just gets our whole physiology in our mind ramped up to step up to the challenge, right? The problem with stress is when it becomes too much, when it becomes overwhelming and chronic, then that's the problem. Anxiety, if you think of anxiety as part of the fight or flight response, then it can be useful in that it helps us survive. The bear trying to eat us or something, right? When there's actual danger, and our body does what it's naturally built to do to keep us alive, in that sense, it's useful and functional. The problem is that for most humans, we haven't figured out what to do with that energy after the crisis is over, and we get stuck in that anxiety mode or that fight or flight or freeze mode, and that causes problems for us long term, because the fight or flight response is great for surviving the moment. It's
Yeah.
just not a great way of life, right? When you're in that state, your blood pressure's higher, your brain sort of de-evolves from higher thinking, your fine motor skills don't really work. All the blood and all the control goes to running away or
Hmm.
fighting or playing dead. Do you know what I mean? And so it can get you through. But if you're doing that in everyday life, that's not going to be that
Hmm.
helpful for you or for the
Yeah, I
people
guess you
around you.
have to learn to recognize if it's useful. And I feel like that kind of ties into, like
Right.
trusting your gut instincts about something. You're feeling, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. It's a
Hmm.
bad
Yeah.
situation. Because I feel like most of the time you're right. Your instincts are right, and it's quite surprising. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's probably like it relates to like learning to just listen to yourself better.
Hmm. 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 Well, and we do that far better. You're right. I mean, our instincts, really what that is our unconscious mind processing information way faster than our conscious mind, right? And giving us the information, but giving us
Yeah.
in ways that we're not used to listening to, right? So, but when we're in a state of calm happiness, when we're in a state of sort of relaxed awareness, we are much better able to hear that message, and much better able to listen and do and follow our guts, versus when we're anxious or stressed or burnt out. Then we're just running the programming and we're not actually listening to information that's coming to us in real
Hmm.
time about the situation that's in front of us.
Do you think that stress is contagious? So if you're surrounded by stressful
Yes.
people or stressed people, it's gonna like leak onto you.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Very much so. We kind of are products of our
Hmm.
environment, even though we like to think we're not. If we're around anxious, stressed people or depressed people, it's much easier for us to feel that way as well. If it's one person, then it's a 50-50 fight. If you're around three people, then you're outnumbered, right? And so I have this saying that says, it's really hard to do. You can't
Yeah.
do rehab when you live in a crack house, right?
Yeah.
You need to change your environment, because our brains really do soak up what we're around. And we talked earlier in the conversation about the connection and the need for social connection, and that's it. This is the social connection. And if you have sort of stressed or unhappy or unhealthy people around you, well, that's going to be your quote unquote support. That's going to be the system that you're swimming in. And so it's going to be very hard for you to be something other than that, unless you put a lot of effort into it. Now, it's not
Hmm.
impossible, but it's just a lot of work. So if you find yourselves around stressed out, unhappy people, change the environment.
Yeah.
Go take a break. Go for a walk. Go find some people that are in a better state to hang out with. Doesn't mean you have to abandon those folks, but you do realistically need to limit your
Yeah. And
exposure
I
to
guess
them if you
pulling
want to stay
into
healthy and
the,
happy.
if you're in that situation, pull in the thing where it's like, what level am I? And then when you get to like a level seven or
Yes.
a
Yep.
six, then
Exactly.
think about doing something.
Yep. Time to pull the ripcord. Get out of there. Yeah. That's
So
right.
you're
Take a
working on
break.
something
Yeah.
called Money Mind DNA. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yes. Yes. So this is So it's a cool project I'm doing with two other gentlemen. Charlie Fatal is the money guy, and Dr.
Hmm.
Mikolai Rajek is the DNA guy. And and I'm the mind person, right? Um, so the whole idea is we wanted to bring a full service type of treatment to people, especially businesses and business owners, for their folks, because we know, just like our little experiment we did earlier, if you're feeling good, if you know that your money is taken care of, if you know that your mindset is solid and you've got good health practices, if you understand what is sort of in the future, or what is best for you based on your genetic profile. When you have that stuff figured out and you have some certainty around that, that reduces your stress. It helps you to feel better. You can plan better. And because
Hmm.
of that, you function better. So for the people in the C-suite, the leadership, they're going to make better decisions. They're going to be more creative. They're going to problem solve better. For the people who are, the general rank and file, they're going to be happier with the company they're working for because the company has their back. They're going to be in better shapes. They're going to have better physical and emotional health, and also have better relationships at home. So there's less of that stuff that bleeds over into their jobs, and their lives are better. And so we know happy workers are productive workers. And so, we wanted to come together to offer this to businesses, and each of us have our own individual businesses as well, right? And we still work with that, but
Hmm.
we thought we'd come together in this partnership to, offer a full service program to individuals and the companies they work for, right? So the first level, we have a free introductory seminar, and you come in, check us out, see who we are, learn some of these basic techniques, and if they seem useful to you, there's a next level where we do a 6 hour training over a few weeks that we can do for companies and their people. And then of course we have concierge services at the end of that people can take advantage of on a more individualized basis. So really full service for
So
people
it's
who
kind
are
of
interested in this sort of thing, which I think
so
everybody
it's
would
like
benefit.
seminars. Are they virtual or in person? Okay.
Yes, virtual.
And
Yeah,
so
virtual.
how do
Yeah.
they all kind of connect? Like, what's the DNA part? Is that like health?
So it's health generally. Dr. Rajic
Hmm.
is a geneticist, and so he has access to genetic testing material where you can actually get your genome sequenced, and because of that, that helps you to plan for the future in
Mm.
terms of, here's my predisposition. If I know I have a predisposition for, let's say, I diabetes, for example. Well, if I make certain lifestyle changes now, I may never get diabetes, right? Whereas if I don't know that, I just kind of live the regular life,
Hmm.
maybe it'll show up when I'm 40, and surprises me. Or it can help with planning for having kids. But one of the big things that it really does work really well for is if there's any issues you have now, and there are medications that you need to take, particularly for heart disease, cancer, or any of the psychoactive medications, depression, anxiety, anything like that. These tests can tell you which drugs work better for your
Okay.
particular genetic makeup, so that you can actually dial in your medication to know, okay, well, here are the ones that work best, and here are the doses that work best for my body type. Whereas if you don't
Hmm.
have that, it's kind of hit and miss, right? And so it's a very, very powerful tool that it's pretty cutting edge, but people really don't know
Yeah,
about it
no,
and
and
don't
I
know
can
how to
see how
use it.
that would tie into like the mind side of things as well, because it can give people a peace of mind if
Hmm.
know what's going to work for you or
Absolutely.
what the future might hold.
Yeah. Yep, yep. And it ties into the money side too. And we talked about money being
Hmm.
a bigger stressor for people, but on the flip side, if you know kind of what may be coming, you can have some
Hmm.
financial plans for the future to make sure that's not going to surprise you either. And you have the things that you have enough finances to be able to take care of you if something goes wrong, or if you need insurance or whatever it might be.
Okay. I have just two more questions. So, one is, what sort
Sure.
of advice do you have for people that might be struggling with stress or burnout or anxiety?
So, a couple things. One is you're not alone. This is not just unique to you, because this is one of the things that stress, burnout, anxiety, one of the mind games it plays with people is to think
Hmm.
that you're alone. It's all you. Something's wrong with you. This is not the truth. This is a very, very common thing, especially now. So you're not alone. Two, get help. You don't have to do it by yourself. There are lots of really good qualified mental health professionals. There are lots of good coaches out there to help you figure out where you need to go and what you need to do and how to do this better. I will say that understand that you're the consumer, so it is your choice. You get to shop around, you get to see what works for you. And again, that question, is this working for me? Right? So when you're looking for who you want to work with, or the system or the plan or the group or whatever, you need to ask that question. Does this feel safe for me? Does this feel comfortable? Do I feel looked after? Do these people or this person, do they have the expertise and the knowledge that will help me, right? And then know that you're free to shop around even after you've chosen somebody. So you chose somebody, maybe they help you for a
Yeah.
while, and maybe you need something else now.
Yeah.
Go get it. It's okay. So that's the
Awesome.
advice I give to people.
And lastly, is there anything that I've missed that you might want to cover or you feel is important?
I would say, yeah,
Okay.
I would say know that you're worth it, right? Know that you are worth spending the time, the energy, the money on to feel good, because then everything that you care about is going to benefit from that, right? When you put gas in the car, then the car can
Yeah.
drive better, right? No one would think about getting a high performance car than fueling it with kerosene, right? Why would you do that? You'd wreck the car, right? And you wouldn't get the performance out of it that you'd want to. But so we are all high performance vehicles. We're all high performance instruments, and we need to, and we have the right to fuel ourselves with good activities, good mindset, good food, right? Good people around us, so that we can feel better. And when we feel better, we do better. And it's we have the
Yeah.
right. It's your
And I
right and
feel
your
like
responsibility.
people, we often struggle to look after ourselves, but if it comes to looking after others, we're really good at it.
Hmm.
Like if we had to feed someone, we'd feed them properly. But when it
Hmm.
comes to ourselves, we might not do it.
Right.
Um, it's funny how
Hmm.
that works when really it should be we put ourselves first. Like you said,
Yep.
if you're in the plane, you look after yourself first so you can look after everyone else.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you have more to give when you're full, right? It's harder to give when you're empty. And so, yeah, it makes sense, but we don't think of it that way. That's why I want to
Yes.
have these
Well, thank
conversations.
you so much for coming on. It's been a really great talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Lisa. This has been just a fun
No
conversation. So
problem. You've
thanks for
been
having me.
a great guest. You're really easy to speak to, so it's been really good.